All right, so going live again, and as per normal, I'm going to share this link to Facebook so more people can know what we're doing. I always feel like I should just sit here and do nothing for the first few minutes because it takes a little while for people to show up anyways. But anyways, posting this up now. Boom, it's posted. All right, so my plan for this live stream is to talk about the differences between reishi mushroom extract, reishi spore powder, reishi spore oil, and then talk a little bit about incense, which I just posted up on hyperionherbs.com because some people were curious on the usages and benefits of agarwood and sandalwood and what people could use them for, what they might expect from that. And then, so I'll share that and some of my experience as well. Let's see. So that's kind of the rough outline and plan, and as usual, I should probably just sit here and do nothing while people chime in, if anyone decides to at all, and maybe maybe it'll be a live stream of me talking to myself for however long. But basically right now I'm brewing my 100-year-old pour. Actually, it's probably about 95, 96 years old, but nearly 100 years old. And I started brewing this a few hours ago. I'm probably like, I don't know, 8 or 10 brews into it. And it's still going a little bit, actually. It's still got some juice left in it, surprisingly, because I just did a few grams thereabouts in my really small teapot, which I'll show you once I'm done. Yeah, so I'm brewing in this really, really small pot, which, as you can see, it's like barely the size of my hand, but it brews like one perfect size cup. But if you missed the tea, it's my 100-year-old pu'er tea. Actually, it's about 95, but for all intents and purposes, let's just say it's 100 years old. And I've had that verified by people who know what's up, who can tell these types of things, and they all have concluded that it is indeed that old. So I'm on probably brew 10 or 9 or something like that. It's probably going to wash out soon, but I'm just going to keep putting boiling water on it and let it brew out for a while. Tasting notes. Let's have a look. It's still a little bit hot, but I would say it definitely has some lingering sweetness, and it has kind of the woody camphor menthol notes. It also has a little bit of a sour note, which is probably from fermentation. Just because it's like 100 years old, so there's a little bit of like it's not sour, but it's a little touch of the aging. I don't think it had the most perfect storage in its life, because you can taste a little bit of humidity in it, but otherwise it's mostly pretty clean and kind of smooth. Has a little bit of the camphor menthol notes going on. Do you like having agarwood while having pu'er? Generally, yeah. Like right now I'm covered in it because I got, I posted about this the other day, but I got the agarwood in and I shipped out all the bottles already to everyone that ordered. So I've been applying this quite generously. Also, I sent out an email today with the incense, which for everyone that ordered the incense, you should be getting it today or tomorrow, depending on where you are in the country. And obviously, if you're outside the US, it's going to take a little bit longer, probably next week. But basically, I enjoy burning the agar wood or heating it in the heater, or generally I'm just kind of covered in the oil at this point. So wherever I turn, I'm getting whiffs of it. And I do find that it's a good combination. And it looks like this tea is pretty much washing out. It's pretty light. So I have a few other potentials lined up. This is like a 1980s golden needle that I haven't had in a few years. And this is actually a 1996 show that I got from a really famous tea shop in Paris that honestly, in hindsight, it was a big regret. I spent a few $1,000s there and I wish I could have that money back because the tea kind of sucks. It has some elements of being, yeah, just you can smell the aging and the storage wasn't that great. It just, it's not that clean. So I might drink some of that just to revisit it and see what it's like and probably talk trash about it and lament about my regret in spending $2,000 or $3,000 at this store on a bunch of shitty tea, most of which I've given away. I mean, it's not shitty, but it's just nowhere near as good as what I have on my website right now for a fraction of the price. Like, if you would give me any of the teas that I had at that shop, including the 40s, 50s, 60s, then I would, if you said, do you want those or do you want your 1980s loose shung, which is $20 an ounce, I'll take my 80s loose shung all day. Like, their stuff is not that good. But they are quite famous, which is unfortunately so often the case. Who doesn't love a good story, right? I think there was a question. Do you like any mid-2000s teas? I don't know if I have any. I might have some shungs that are like about that age, but nothing in my regular rotation is in that age. Have I heard of Yang Qing Hao? Yeah, I think I might have some teas from that factory, actually. Yeah, I had some Iwu teas from that factory, and I was not impressed. But I'm sure they have some good stuff on the higher end, like most companies do. Yeah, why not? Let's just try this this 1996 show. It's mostly just pure leaf, which I guess is nice, but it's gonna fill my pot. My hopes are not high for this tea. I'm imagining I'll probably brew it 3 or 4 times and then wash it and spit it out because of just the way it smells, but we'll give it the benefit of the doubt and you can watch me talk trash about it, I suppose. I much prefer the teas that I source because they actually have clean aging, so they don't taste like a frickin' basement. Because if something's aged and stored well, you shouldn't taste it. And I really understood that once I had this Leo on, that was from the 1940s. And you could have given it to me and told me that it was from 1990, from 5 years ago or whatever, and I would have believed you because it was so clean and you couldn't really smell or taste any age on it whatsoever. Oh God. It has that like smoky, like bacon flavor, or bacon smoky, salty flavor, which, or smell, which is not a good sign. So this tea might go straight in the garbage, even though I'm sure I paid a lot of money for it. But I didn't know better in those days. Yeah, the smell is not encouraging, but we'll just give it the benefit of the doubt because sometimes, you know. Let's see. Do you visit any tea shops in Portland? Generally, well, there's one called Chi Fine Teas, and they have some pretty decent oolongs. Their pu'er was kind of just like mid-grade. in my opinion. Their oolongs were okay, but everything's clean and doesn't, will make you feel okay. And they're really nice, cool people, and it's a really nice atmosphere, and they're super nice and fun to talk to and hang out with, and super knowledgeable. So it's more for that rather than the tea. But I generally don't go out for it, because generally the tea sucks, unless you want to go for the social event. So let's see, first brew. I did 2 rinses on this. We'll see. I had ordered another ounce of your sinking shung. Yeah, that is really, really, really good tea. I don't know why I'm not drinking that. And this is all I have. This bag is all I have left of that tea, actually. It's like probably 3 or 4 ounces of just shake and 1 little nugget of cake. Like, it's just, this is the middle piece of a cake, because the cake was like really hard and difficult to break up. So this is all the shake and the remnants from that. But it's a really amazing tea, and I would sell it more, but honestly breaking up the cakes is a pain in the ass. So I'm just gonna stick to loose teas, because it's easier for me, and the price is usually cheaper as well. The flavor on this is okay, but it has like a harsh note to it. It has a little bit of like a paper menthol flavor, which is decent, but it's also like a element of harshness that's left over, I think, from, it might be a raw tea. How do you feel about Yi Sheng? Oh, you mean the clay and the clay pots? I mean, I have, the pot I'm using now is Yi Sheng. I have like a 40 or 50 year aged Yi Sheng. Oh, Yi Sheng. I think people throw around the word wild pretty casually, but they never define what it actually means. Like, so I'm always a little bit skeptical when anytime anyone says something is wild. It's like, well, we need to really quantify what you actually mean by that. But again, it's to be honest, my general opinion is that people generally rely on adjectives, not adjectives, but like stories or brand names to sell something when the quality isn't actually good. Like, if you notice with all the pu'er teas that I've ever sold, I never really say shit about the manufacturing process, where it comes from, the mountain, the side of the mountain, or the factory, or the recipe number, or that I got it from a guy who knows a guy who's a farmer who's been farming for 100 years. Like, all these little hyperbolic stories that people tell and get hypnotized by, but generally don't have diddly squat to do with it, whether or not it's actually good. So like, people are like, oh, it's wild tea trees and this and this and this, and it's like, so what? It really doesn't mean anything. Even with the sandalwood and agarwood incense, I didn't go down into any of the minutia, because the quality is really good, if not spectacular. And that's pretty much it. And if people need like factoids and data points and spreadsheets and SWOT analysis, then they probably shouldn't buy it, because they clearly aren't really on board or can't recognize quality ahead of time. So that's kind of my perspective, and I'm not really in that tea world so much anymore, because I've just patently been disappointed by mostly everything that I've had from the majority of companies, And anything that people have generally sent me as like, oh, you got to try this tea. I got it from so-and-so, and we get it from here, and they're great, and this and this and this. It's generally not any good by any objective stretch of the imagination, but it's solely good on the basis of whatever the story is or whatever hypnosis people are under the influence of. But that's just kind of my, and that's not kind of, it is my my personal opinion and my experience, which might sound elitist and arrogant and mean or harsh or whatever, but I mean, it is what it is. Because the way I'm describing it might seem to be those things to some people, but compared to the people that I learned from and compared to the people that have really, really good stuff, it's actually very polite and open-minded, because the higher up the scale you go, people tend to get way more opinionated. Their perceptions, their ability to discern quality is razor sharp and very quick. And it's just these whole other worlds that are secret and not really accessible to most people. So, yeah, that's kind of my opinion and perspective on that. Next question is, what is your relationship to Sweden? What does that mean? You can explain what that means a little bit more. I can answer it, but otherwise, my relationship is, it's a country that is in Europe. I don't know. I mean, I go there sometimes, but I don't know if that's what you're asking, why I go there, but I'm just curious. So update on brew number, I think 4 on this 90s Shung. It actually has some decent kind of like incense-y flavors, and it's actually decently smooth and sweet, but it still has a little bit of a harsh note. Like a touch of muskiness from what I assume to be being stored in a cave or some nonsense like that. But all in all, it's not terrible, and the body feel isn't bad. So maybe I didn't totally get ripped off. But I'll still definitely give it away to someone, because it doesn't really hold a candle to any of the other teas to my left. Next question, how much cordyceps is good for a day? Whenever I take it, it's usually 1 or 2 teaspoons in the morning. That's generally what I do. I find my cordyceps to be pretty strong, so I don't mass dose it. So that's kind of what I stick to for all of the herbs. Like even lion's mane today, I had about 2 teaspoons in my morning drink. That's usually what I stick to, and maybe I'll have more in the afternoon or evening, but it kind of just depends on if you're going to be active or doing stuff, because I find the cordyceps can be kind of energizing and make me want to do stuff, so I just have to kind of keep that in mind, whereas reishi and lion's mane and chaga, I don't notice that same type of energy from. But generally with those mushroom extracts, 1, 2, 3 teaspoons is like a good, pretty solid way, and then sometimes as little as a half or a 1/4 teaspoon is knowledgeable, is decent as well. Oh, I see. I think you said in another video that you're going to Sweden, so I just wonder why you're going there. Yeah, I'll be doing some retreats there, not teaching, but attending as a student under a specific tutelage. So I go there every summer, and this summer I'll be in Europe for almost a month, which will be interesting because I'll be pretty much training all day and mostly. So that'll be, I'm not sure how I'm going to balance that all out with managing work and stuff, but I likely won't. I don't know if I'll do any live streams while I'm there, maybe when I first get to Amsterdam or something, but I'll be somewhat off the map and off the grid for a while. But I'll still be doing emails, and I'll be keeping up to date with managing my companies. And I'll probably pre-film and preload videos and content ahead of time. That'll be posted out, but they'll be, like I said, filmed ahead of time because I'll be gone for a month. Next question, is heating tea in styrofoam bad? Yeah, I definitely would not do that unless you are plastic and xenoestrogen deficient. Then I would 100% avoid consuming warm liquids or any liquids out of styrofoam for that matter. Yeah, that's just bad news, and you shouldn't be doing it unless plastic and that type of stuff is something you're into. But I find it to be kind of gross and bad for health. What sort of courses are you going to attend in Sweden? Basically, let's just say training in internal arts is what I'll be doing in the forests of Sweden. That's pretty much the extent of specificity that I'll be sharing. Maybe when I'm there, I'll talk a little bit more about it, or perhaps share some of my experiences. I mean, I've had people be like, oh, you should do a vlog about your training and your experiences, but to me, it's just not really attractive or an appealing thing, because there's this thing that happens where well, it's kind of two things. One is, if you say words, what people will do is try to make those words fit into their pre-existing experience, rather than admit, I don't know, or I don't have any relationship, or things of that nature. So that's kind of why I don't talk about specific things, because they're not really relevant to people unless they're doing precisely what I'm doing. Because if I've ever tried to talk about things in the past, people will be like, oh, yeah. Like, for a good example is when I gave an intro talk to a workshop that I taught a few years ago. And I was talking about these pretty advanced things and things which take, let's say, 8 years to pull off, decade to pull off, if you're training intensely, right? And this lady is like, after the talk, she's like, oh yeah, I really understood what you're saying. I could really feel it. I could really feel what you're saying, and going through all those processes. And I'm just like, dude, what? But I just smiled and nodded. But that's kind of what people do. It's like kind of a human tendency. So that's why I generally am just choosy about what degree of specificity I share on certain topics. But anyways, let me go back and get the questions. Do you have lion's mane and cordyceps for sale? And will it be a good mixture for pre-workout along with gynostemma as a tea base? Absolutely. On HyperionHerbs.com, I have both cordyceps and lion's mane available in potent extracts, which I highly recommend. Cordyceps is great pre-workout. I personally really love it for that purpose. It gives me quite a nice energy and a bit of a boost, and I think that would be a solid combination with those three. So definitely check that out. Thoughts on Palo Santo? I'm not a fan of it personally. I think it smells like shoes or feet. But I have friends that love it, but I don't like it at all. I don't like sage either. So I don't know too much about it other than I don't really like it. I think they're just sage and Palo Santo and things like that. They're just a little bit overdone. And also kind of like Nag Champa and things like that. They're just kind of like, in my mind, they're just kind of chintzy and not good. Too strong, too aggressive, too in your face is my personal opinion. But I really like sandalwood and agarwood. Hence It's why they're for sale on my website. Years ago, you made a video about megadosing supplements and herbs, and it worked really well for me then. But now I get sick even when I go up a slight dose. Do you have any idea what has changed? In terms of your experience or mine or both? Because I don't really megadose things like that anymore either, and it was just kind of a phase. And I don't think it's really that healthy or sustainable. I think it's better to do things consistently over the long term rather than just like a mass dose. In some ways, it's like you could exercise 3 hours, 3 hours once a week, or you could do a little bit every day, and actually a little bit every day is going to be better than just a shitload in once a day or once a week or something. Obviously, depending on what kind of training you're doing, but I think you kind of get the idea. Things are just meant to be done regularly over the long period of time and gives your body time to adjust and acclimate and go to a higher level of performance, let's say. Would you ever do liquid extracts again? When did I do liquid extracts? I'm confused. I don't really remember. I don't think I ever did them, really. I mean, I've never really found a supplier or manufacturer that did that great of a job, or I've just found the powdered extracts to be more potent. But to be totally honest with you, from a business perspective, liquid extracts make a lot more money because they're way weaker and not as potent as powdered extracts, because it's going to be at least 25%. There's going to be at least 25% alcohol and then some percentage of water. So it's going to be pretty dilute. So that's why I never really have got into it. But from a business perspective, the margins are way better because it's actually way more dilute and way less concentrated. But for some reason, people really like it. People complain about powdered extracts or something, but in reality, they're far superior. The private reserve, those things are gone and never coming back based on reasons and issues between myself and the person I was getting it from. But basically, I can use those for my own personal basis, but can't ever sell them again anymore, or mention them or show them on the internet ever again. But if I do in-person tea journeys or anything like that, then I can share them with people. But that's pretty much the extent of what that will be. Do you ship to Japan or know of any reputable Japanese herb companies? I think we ship there, but for some reason we can't ship Hushawu to Japan. There's some law or regulation, but I think we can ship everything else there. I think. That's definitely one place I haven't had many clients and haven't had much experience with whatsoever. So I don't know. Unfortunately, I can't be very helpful on that regard. What's your opinion on ayahuasca? In terms of what, I guess, is perhaps a follow-up question. Like, in general, for myself personally, I'm not a fan. I mean, I can see there's positive and negatives depending on situation. So, negatives, I've seen quite a lot of people get habituated to it. I won't say addicted, because I don't think there's necessarily really a chemical addictive mechanism like opiates or nicotine or alcohol or something, but people do get very habituated and dependent on it. I've seen that time and time again. Even if it's just psychological, I mean, people do that with marijuana. They just kind of becomes a crutch. But I think For myself, I will never do it, and I don't really see the value or benefit at this juncture of my life. But there are certain situations for people I think that it could be helpful if they're actually doing it correctly and appropriately, meaning not recreationally, not casually. But the problem is that people are misusing words. So you can tell someone, and I've had this conversation with people, and they're like, oh, I don't do it recreationally. I have the highest reverence for the Mother Aya and for Mother Nature, and we have the deepest spiritual regard. And we studied with this shaman, and it's from this tribe in this region, and we do all these things. But we just do it every month or twice a month or whatever. And I'm like, dude, that's recreationally. Like, you can use all this hypnotic justification, but your overall orientation is like a drug addict. And instead of drugs, you're just addicted to this fake notion of spirituality, because you're generally probably really self-absorbed and narcissistic. And you've made your own personal validation and gratification your God, and under the guise of personal growth or something of that nature. That's just what I've seen quite commonly. Or people just get lost in the milieu of New Age nonsense, and then that becomes their new identity. So the pattern is you have your pre-existing alleged broken identity, which is sick and needs to be healed and fixed and saved and this and stuff. And then you just replace that with some spiritual version of the same thing, which is just, perhaps necessary in a short-term life growth type of experience. But unfortunately, I see quite a lot of people get stuck there for forever, sometimes for quite, until they're on well into their old age. And that's just not really healthy. But yeah, it's just all around a big minefield. But again, there are situations and opportunities where probably it could help people. And there are people that do that. If they just perhaps use it as a wake-up call once or twice, and then make necessary, tangible changes, make necessary and real action in their life that has meaning and consequence, not just like wear tie-dye shirts and listen to Joe Rogan and put Alex Gray paintings on your wall or something, or something that's makes you feel. It has the branding of being something tangible, but in reality is still just a bit trivial and not really doing anything. So that's my opinion, which I guess isn't that high. What are cracked cell spores known to do for your body and mind? Can you talk a little bit about the product? Yeah, that was actually the point of the live stream, which I haven't even addressed, which was comparing the spore powder, the mushroom extract, and the spore oil, because there's overlap, and I can see how there could be confusion. And this is also part of the reason why I avoided selling the spore powder for so long, because it is a bit confusing, a little bit, I guess it could be. But in reality, my main attitude is it's all good, honestly, which I don't know if it's not helpful, but I really like Reishi. I think mostly everything about it is awesome. So, I think if you did ayahuasca, you would reap huge benefits. That sounds exactly like something that someone who's really into ayahuasca would say, which is something I've heard at least more than a dozen times. But it might be ayahuasca, it could be DMT, it could be psilocybin, it could be the frog medicine. They're like, oh, I think you'd really like it. You'd really get a lot out of it. Like, really? Because I've done all the preparatory work. I mean, I just had this long conversation about this with a friend the other day, where oftentimes what people think of as being progress or healing is actually just more barriers and obstacles for themselves, and typically more dis-ease. But they're just kind of pushing it down the line. So that's just kind of my experience. But being in this world, I can't tell you how many countless times I've heard variations on that theme. Or people be like, you don't do psychedelics. How do you know this stuff? How do you talk about this stuff? You don't do psychedelics. It's like, dude, really? Like, I mean, but at the same time, I'm 34, and if it was myself between 18 and like 22, I would be saying the exact same shit. I was like, dude, everyone needs to be smoking weed. Everyone needs to be ingesting these plant medicines. This is like what the world needs. Like, or I would say to people, like, oh man, you really need to be a raw foodist. It's really gonna uplift your spiritual nature. Like, just all these types of things. And that's just part of life. But I'm older now. I've gone through experiences. I've gone through my own, and I've also just been in this genre for quite a while. So I have observed quite a lot of tendencies. And the biggest tendency I've observed in myself and in other people and humans in general is basically that the capacity for self-delusion and lying to ourselves is insanely profound, which is why as I've gotten older, I'm much more surrounded myself with much more external authorities, people that I look up to and trust and respect, who've been through what I've been through and are at where I want to get to, so that I can basically have a check and balance for my own conduct, because they will very quickly become apparent when I'm perhaps deluding myself, which is not putting anyone down. It's just actually looking at a certain aspect of life that is inherent in our minds and looking at it and being able to work with it and perhaps help to change the nature of it a little bit. But anyways, I don't really care to talk about psychedelics and that type of thing, because it's honestly not important to me, and I'm not interested in it, and it just is kind of boring at this point. There's not really much anyone can say that's incredibly interesting, unless we start talking about using them in a clinical setting where it's actually controlled and it's actually specific. Then that's a bit more interesting, because then it can actually create real change for people who might actually need it, not just for someone looking to escape. Because this is something that people really need to reflect on for themselves, and something I had to do a lot of as well, which is oftentimes what people construe as spirituality is just escapism, or even religion. It's basically some way of saying, like, this life sucks, this world sucks, I suck. So I got to find some way to like get one up on it, or somehow escape from it, or get out of it, or get somewhere outside of it, right? And that's, if people really reflect on what they're saying and what they're meaning and thinking and feeling, generally it will be some variation on that, which is, I think, a more actionable and tangible train of thought than just talking about pineal glands and dimethyltryptamine and angels and other realms and Gaia theory and all this type of stuff. It just really is not interesting to me on a personal basis. And I'm saying you shouldn't be into it. I'm just saying, for me, I'm not interested, and it's boring. Will heating reishi and other mushroom extracts affect the potency? There we go. Finally, a really good question. No, it will not lower their potency at all, because they're hot water extracts, and they've already been extracted with hot water. So you mix it with hot water, and it's just fine. Because they're not like it's not like a the nutrients, or let's say the constituents you want to get out of it, are not really affected by heat. If not, they're actually enhanced by it. Meaning, if you, let's say, drink it on a hot tea, or drink it through a hot tea, it actually can help open up your receptors and relax your throat and your stomach, and can get into your system. Hence why major delivery vehicle for Chinese herbs is hot teas, decoctions. So definitely a great way to do that. Let's see. There's also another big thing within psychedelics and these things that people don't recognize, which why would they? Because they're perhaps not Chinese medicine aficionados or nerds. Because basically, in general, a couple things happen. First is space can open up between your physical body and your energy body. So you have perhaps some expanded sense of perception, of awareness. Cool. But generally what can happen is that doesn't close back in, because people don't actually have the skill set and the dedication and the discernment and all these qualities to actually be able to control that mechanism, or perhaps even be sensitive to the existence of the mechanism. Meaning, there are people that I know and things that I've learned where you can actually open and close and decrease and increase that space depending on what spectrum of sensitivity you want to be on. So what happens is people are blasting themselves with even weed, mushrooms, psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, whatever. So they're increasing the space and having the sense of expansiveness, but eventually it's kind of like stretching elastic, and then it just kind of snaps. So then it's kind of just like, and then it's cool because you're like, whoa, I'm expanded. But that's never really been the point of any Eastern tradition or any real system of development. That's not the point. It never has been. It's never been the focus. It's never been the goal, the objective, period, end of story. The problem is that this thing opens up, but then anything can come in, positive and negative. Then you're looking at how it's going to affect your kidneys, how it's going to be draining your kidneys, affecting your Jing in a negative way, probably causing qi deficiency, and then eventually things like anxiety, Shen disturbance, meaning erratic thoughts and minds, racing thoughts, irrelevant tangents, inability to discern and to have clarity, anxiety, thyroid issues, autoimmune conditions, digestive issues, chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue. Fairly predictable things, which you can just see in people. You look at their body and you're like, yep, there's all those things. So those are all predictable outcomes. Why? Because there's no free ride. If you're having this experience, it's requiring energy. The energy doesn't just come from nowhere. It's coming from your system, which is fine, again, short-term, medicinally, or perhaps, if someone does it irregularly, or perhaps more once or twice just to turn their life around, that's a different story. But basically, in general, that's what the outcome is generally going to be. So, yeah, that's why, that's a nutshell. We could go and spend an hour or two on the Chinese medical theory about how these things affect the body, but that's kind of a general thing. Burn up your Jing way faster, will deplete your qi, exhaust your kidneys, and then eventually your Shen will get disturbed. And then there's going to start developing real, tangible, verifiable health problems. And again, very easy to see, very tangible, very obvious in someone's physicality and in their eyes. Yeah. Did you talk about spores versus extract powder? No, I got distracted. Even though it's the point of the live stream, but it's been 45 minutes. But I'll do it now. I'm going to kill the chat from my screen. basically, as I was saying, reishi, it's all good. The mushroom extract is basically the whole fruiting body, and its ratio of polysaccharides and triterpenes is different than the spores. The spores have more triterpenes, less polysaccharides, but also more ganoderic acids and vitamin and mineral type content because it's just spore powder and it's not an extract. Whereas the mushroom will have, again, more polysaccharides and beta-glucans, less triterpenes, and also less of the nutritive type thing because it's a hot water extract and it's not really the focus and the aim of it. The spore oil is going to be a CO2 extraction of the oil of the spore powder. So it's going to have way more of the fatty, oily compounds and also the triterpenes, which if you get some of the spore powder and you move it between your fingers, it's really quite oily, and it's kind of like greasy a little bit. Whereas the mushroom extract powder is not like that at all. I find that the fruiting body is a little more calming, and the spore powder is a bit more immunological and energizing a little bit. But it's a bit vague, it's a bit subjective, because honestly, I think they're all three really good. And honestly, I take all three. It just kind of depends on a few practical things. It depends on someone's budget. Depends on how much of a reishi nerd they are. Because if someone just has a limited budget and they just want the most benefit from reishi, and they just want to do one thing, they should just do the mushroom fruiting body extract powder. That's kind of like got it all and will do the most for the least, in my opinion. But if you're a reishi nerd or a total herb nerd like me, then you'll just kind of do them all at various points and see what it is. And maybe not the spore oil if that's outside of your budget. I feel like that's a little less essential, in my opinion. And I would say that's the one I probably take least, just because I tend to run out of it and I forget about it, and I can't just like throw it in my drink. Even though I actually just realized I have like 500 milliliters of spore oil in my refrigerator right now. I just forgot about. So let's see. I think there's another question. Have you seen Ryan Cropper's channel? I've never heard of him. I actually don't follow or listen to anyone online. I don't think. It's very maybe like 2 or 3 people, but no vloggers or anyone like that. Let's see. How does your spore oil compare to cracked spores in terms of potency per dollar spent, and what is the significance of it being grown on Dwan wood? So Dwan wood just basically means, like, if you literally translate it, it just means section of wood, which is hilarious because people translate it in different ways. But in general, it's referring to the fact that it's grown on specific types of hardwood that it would be found to be growing on in nature naturally. So the benefit of it being grown on hardwood in the growing methodology that I use is that it's closer to perhaps how it would actually grow naturally, but generally more potent because we're controlling the environment and controlling more aspects of it. So it's grown in hardwood inside these tents up in the mountains in China, and then it's actually allowed to go through its full growth cycle. It's not like accelerated, or it's not harvested premature, but it's harvested when it's actually mature once it's spored. So that then we get these reishis that are just like kind of big and just really awesome and really nice looking. I have some in my apartment, they're not in this room. So basically it being grown in that way is just better, in my opinion, because the energetics are better, are more noticeable, are more potent. The bioactive chemicals are there as well. And it just is sort of how reishi should be. It's just like, do you want a tomato that was grown in a hothouse where you bite into it, it's like an apple, or do you want an heirloom ripe tomato off the vine from a farmer's market? Like, that's how a tomato should be. So to me, it's just kind of like, this is how reishi should be. Man, did my freaking YouTube froze again? This is whack. Let's see if I can get this to unfreeze. Nope, it's definitely